earthquake is on the way. Democrats very excited. Republicans saying, hey, Democrats were excited before last November's election. Turned out there wasn't much for them to be excited about. Are they in for a replay of that? So that's the spring special election sprint. It starts tomorrow in Kansas. All eyes then turn to Georgia. There's a wild card up there in Montana, maybe. A lot to be looking at for an early readout of potential seismic activity here in the Trump presidency. Let's bring in some folks to talk about the sprint here. We've got Brad Woodhouse, Democratic strategist, president of Americans United for Change, Rick Tyler, MSNBC political analyst and a Republican strategist, and our good friend Casey Hunt, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent. And Casey, I think you're going to be down in Georgia next week. We teed that one up a little bit. Let me start with you. So you look at Kansas tomorrow. Look, it's a long shot for Democrats, to put it mildly, to actually win that. Georgia looks competitive, certainly. If you're a Democrat and you want to send a signal with these special elections that there is something big happening out there, something different that wasn't happening last November, what's the bar here? What's the threshold? What do you need to see out of these two races?
Well, Steve, look, I think one thing that is on the table here is there's a little bit of complacency on the part of Republicans who were, maybe they weren't paying as close attention to some of these races as they should have been. I think you're seeing that certainly in Kansas. A late play from the NRCC, the campaign committee in charge of keeping these races in Republican hands. And I think you saw it in Georgia in so much as there's an 11-person field. There are 11 Republicans running for that particular seat. But I do think that there's also this kind of sense that Democrats and maybe even people who wouldn't normally consider themselves Democrats, who maybe were unengaged from the process generally, if you focus on Georgia, for example, that's a suburban Atlanta district. There are a lot of potentially liberal people. Sorry, there's a little bit of a fly around here. That it's not necessarily a place where there's a lot of people that are very, very active in politics. If you look at the difference between what Tom Price took home in 2016, 20 points that district went for Tom Price. It only went for Donald Trump by 1.5 points or so. So it is potentially a place where we could see this idea that, okay, maybe Democrats weren't super excited about getting out to vote for Hillary Clinton, but they are really, really angry about Donald Trump. And I think the question is, to what extent is that a barometer for what might happen in the 2018 elections? Is potentially the whole House of Representatives at play, or at least is the Republican margin potentially in play? I think those are the questions we're going to start to answer maybe tomorrow and certainly starting on Tuesday of next week.
Yeah, and Rick Tyler, look, that's the question the whole political world is asking. Politically, has anything really changed in this country since Election Day? And so as a Republican, I'm curious, look, clearly your party, that's race in Kansas even, has got your party's attention. They are sending the heavy hitters in there. Georgia, we already know, has both parties' attention. When you look at it as a Republican, what worries you looking at Kansas? What worries you looking at Georgia?
Well, let me start by saying, Steve, welcome to the 2018 political races.
They're here.
Let's start it. I think, look, the fact that we're talking about them, as Casey said, the Republicans were caught a little bit flat-footed. In Georgia, that's Price's seat. That's the Buckhead seat. That's a jungle primary. If the Democrats could conceivably get 50% on opening day, meaning all the Republicans that she mentioned would be splitting the vote, there's two main competitors there, then they could pick up that seat outright. If it goes to a runoff, it means the top two, which a Democrat is likely to be one of them, it's likely they won't capture that seat. In Kansas, I think you just have a candidate in the state treasurer Estes he's not hired people. They've just taken the seat for granted. The Republicans are sending Ted Cruz, who won the presidential primary there. I think Donald Trump won that seat by 27%. So that should be no problem at all for the Republican. But you don't send Ted Cruz up to Kansas if there's no problem at all.
Yeah, can you just, when you look at that, can you set a line on this? Republicans are worried tomorrow if the winning margin in Kansas is less than, what do you think it would be?
I think if it's within, a few points, they should worry. But the objective here, of course, is to keep the seat. But as you say, you have a governor who has very low approval rating. Donald Trump has also a low approval rating. And the Democrats there just picked up a state Senate seat near Wichita in a district race, state race, state legislative race. And so there's blood in the water, and the Democrats are excited, and they want to turn out. And if they can pick off Kansas 4, they'll have a lot of bragging rights.
Yeah, so Brad Woodhouse from the Democratic side, I keep wondering if we've seen this show before. In the run-up to the general election in November, Donald Trump, horrible, unfavorable numbers. People said not qualified, don't think he has the temperament to be commander-in-chief, no way this candidate could win. He ends up winning on Election Day. What if we end up with the Republican winning in Kansas by more than 20 points? What if we end up with the Republicans winning the runoff comfortably in Georgia? Do you end up looking at the Democrat and saying, hey, trapped in the same cycle we were in before?
Well, I don't know. I do think we have seen this before, Steve. I mean, we saw it in 2010 in the special Senate election in Massachusetts. I think it was there where Democrats were complacent, and you saw a special election that was an indicator of what was to come later that year. So I think the thing for Democrats here is not to get too far out over their skis in terms of expectations. I don't think the ultimate story here is who wins or loses these races. The fact that Republicans are scrambling to win them is the story, and the common denominator across all of them, I think, at least two of the common denominators, are Trump is at historically low approval ratings for a president at this point in his presidency, and Obamacare, interestingly, is at its highest approval ratings ever, and I think the fight over health care, the incompetence that it displayed, the fear that it put into a lot of people in these districts, and the anger it generated in progressives and Democrats is the mix that is, I think, creating these opportunities. But the fact of these opportunities is a crap sandwich for Republicans regardless of the outcome.
And Brett, how much are you counting on, again, these are not normally scheduled elections. People are used to, hey, it's November, it's time to think about the election, whatever year it happens to be. Are you just counting on this mattering more to Democrats in these places? These activist, organized Democrats just marking this date on their calendars, getting people out, while Republicans, maybe it doesn't matter as much? Is that part of the calculation here?
Well, I definitely think it matters. It matters to Democrats. I mean, I'm a Democrat. We were shocked at the outcome of the election in November. Shocked at the conduct of this administration and what they've tried to do. Shocked at the kind of phony populism of Donald Trump. And I think all of that has resulted in a type of activism that we haven't seen among Democrats and progressives probably since Barack Obama's election first election in 2008, and so I think we're counting on that, marking the calendar, sending a message. But I think there's also some buyer's remorse. I think that might be the other side of the ledger here, where Republican voters, like suburban voters, particularly in like the seat in Georgia, are having buyer's remorse, and that might explain what's happening on the other side of the ledger.
All right, we'll see. There are a lot of Democrats who say there's a political earthquake coming in 2018. If there is some seismic activity, we may start to pick it up tomorrow. You got Kansas tomorrow.